I've been trying to learn Spanish on and off for a long time. I'd learn some words for a couple of weeks, then quickly become disheartened because I'd hardly make any progress. So I've never really got past the basics, and I cannot read, speak, or understand anything. So recently, I decided to try again, but this time using a different method, one that's both efficient and more active. Now, before you click off this video, I also feel this technique can be applied to learning how to program more efficiently. Learning Spanish vocabulary is very similar to learning the basics in programming. For example, in a beginner's programming course, learning basic elements, such as variables, data types, loops, and so on, can be analogous to learning the individual words in a spoken language. You can learn the elements well in isolation, but how do you glue them together to form a functional program, or in the case of a spoken language, an engaging story? We need to find a technique that can allow us to move on to the next level. What I learned when starting to code is you cannot learn by simply reading books or watching videos. You need to construct your own programs and allow yourself to make mistakes in the process. This is the only way to see how and why all the minute elements operate together, and it allows us to hone our focus and spend time truly understanding why our code works the way it does. To do this, we're going to use a memorization technique called spaced repetition, but we're also going to add something extra to make this process more enjoyable. If you're new to the term spaced repetition, it's a popular method used by students looking to memorize information in the most efficient way possible and still retain it years later. When you learn a fact for the first time, your memory of that fact quickly decays. But if you test your recall before your retention drops too far, you can go for a longer period of time before you need to review that piece of information again. After successive reviews, this rate of decay continues to shrink until you can hold on to that piece of information for years without needing to refresh your memory. This is known as the forgetting curve, and it only seems to work if you space out your reviews at specific time intervals rather than trying to cram the information all at once. But how do we know when we need to review some information? I let Anki organise my flashcards. Anki is a completely free spaced repetition software, and it can be run on multiple devices. But most importantly, it will automatically predict what flashcards you need to review based on how many times you've previously been exposed to that flashcard and how difficult you found it. So for example, for my study of Spanish, I'd create a new deck. I'd add the English word on the front and the Spanish translation on the back. As I studied these words, if I was able to correctly recall the Spanish word, I'd either mark it down as hard, good, or easy. And Anki would serve me up the same card again after the appropriate length of time, indicated just above the buttons here. But instead of simply continuing on with the next card, I'd copy the English prompt and paste it into a new Word document. I'd continue doing this with all the English words and sentences until all the day's cards have been reviewed. Now, with all these English words, I'll try to combine them to make a really basic story. Then I'll translate this into Spanish. My grammar is normally terrible, and I'm not going to know how to connect some words together. But that doesn't matter, because it forces me to actively recall these words and really think about how they can be used together. Finally, I use Google Translate and ChatGPT to correct my attempt, and I use its response to create more flashcards. I'll iterate through the process multiple times in the same day with the same English words, and slowly, over time, I'll start to pick up the nuances of the language. Now, the whole point here is to push yourself to the limits of your capabilities and not fall back into passively reading or listening to information. But you may be asking, how can we do this with a programming language? Well, programmers must learn how to translate their ideas into code. So when we're making our flashcards, we need to frame our question in such a way as to trigger a response with a piece of code, or in other words, as if we're writing a computer program. So for example, instead of writing, explain what a variable does, write, Create two variables in Python, one to hold the name John Smith and the other his age, which is currently unknown to the program. Another example might be, create a for loop that is able to print the numbers from 1 to 10. Or another could be, create a for loop that appends 10 random numbers to a list. Once we have a number of these simple elements in our flashcard deck, we can begin to review them on a daily basis. We can copy these English instructions and try to combine them to create a mini program. Now, just like my Spanish stories, these mini programs can be terrible. The whole point is to get you practicing combining these individual elements in unique ways. This will allow you to really dive into the meaning behind the code and accelerate your learning. Now, the reason why I like this technique is that your flashcard system will present you with exactly what you need to learn based on what you're just about to forget, and you can be really creative when combining these elements as your flashcard deck grows. Okay, that's going to be it for now. Do let me know in the comments what you think about this technique, and if you have any questions, post them below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Learning to program is tough, partly because we don't practice enough. Hopefully this technique will help you organise what you've already learned and get you into the habit of applying your newly acquired skills. I wish you guys all the best and I'll see you soon.